Howdy and welcome back to Wild West Deep Dives. I'm going to tell you all about a man named Cockeyed. Frank Cockeyed Loving was involved in two famous Wild West gunfights, the Long Branch Saloon Shootout and the Trinidad, Colorado Shootout. He walked away from the first one. The second, he would not. Described as a cool and desperate character, he rubbed shoulders with famous Western characters such as Doc Holliday, Masterson and Wyatt Earp. But who was this man they called Cockeyed? How dangerous was he? Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and this is Wild West Deep Dives. Frank Loving was born around 1860 in Jackson County, Missouri. We do not know a ton about his childhood, but we do know that his father died in 1872, and his family moved to Fort Worth, Texas, where his mother remarried. By his teenage years, he was a cowhand on a nearby ranch, and participated in cattle drives near the Queen of the Cowtowns, Dodge City, Kansas. By 19, he turned in his dusty bandana for a deck of cards and became a professional gambler. The Ford County Globe describes Frank Loving as, quote, not much of a rowdy, but more of the cool and desperate order. They also talked about how all these professional gamblers were desperate men. They considered it necessary in their business that they keep up their fighting reputation and never take a bluff. Though Loving was a cool character, he never backed down from an altercation, just like many other desperate characters in town that Loving knew and gambled with. Men like Rowdy Joe Lowe, Luke Short, Doc Holliday, and the Masterson and Earp brothers. The Long Branch Saloon would become Loving's home away from home, and it would be the location of a legendary shootout involving Frank Loving. The story of the origins of the Long Branch Saloon goes as so, according to the Western Living Journal. Dodge City in the early 1870s had already acquired a badge of lawlessness, lots of drinking, and of course, gunslinging. It all started when some cowboys and soldiers were playing a game of baseball, one of the biggest sports in America at the time. The Cowboys placed a bet with the soldiers that if the Cowboys won, the soldiers had to provide building materials for them so that they could build a saloon. It is unclear as to what the bet was if the Cowboys lost, but we will never know because the Cowboys did not lose. Within a few days, the materials were provided, and the Long Branch Saloon was built. Chalkley Beeson and William Harris purchased it in 1878, and it soon became the most popular saloon in Dodge City. Bands would play, cards would be dealt, and gunplay was no stranger. This is where Loving made his nightly home. Loving had been having a string of arguments with a man named Levi Richardson over his wife, Maddie Loving. In March 1879, the two had come face to face on Front Street in Dodge City. Levi punched Frank in the face, Levi being armed and Frank being unarmed. Frank walked away, but Levi said afterwards that eventually he will, quote, blow the guts out of that cockeyed son of a bitch. And this is where the nickname, Cockeyed Frank Loving, came to life. But this was just the start. Before we get too far into it, let's talk about Levi Richardson. To start, it's not Richardson, but instead, Richardson. But you'll hear both throughout the episode. Just know Richardson is the correct pronunciation. He was born in 1851 in Wisconsin, and came to southwest Kansas to try and make a fortune hunting buffalo, as during what is referred to as the Great Slaughter, a hunter could make $100 a day selling hides. $100 in the 1870s is roughly $2,900 today. Richardson also worked as a cowboy for a man named Henry Stittler, which according to Kansas history, was the man who erected the first sod house in Dodge City. Richardson was known as an awkward and slow man, but was also known to be an unpleasant man. And on the 5th of April, 1879, the argument between him and Frank Loving came to its climax. At about 8 p.m., Richardson had given his personal papers to a woman named Sarah Warren, in which he told her, if anything happens to me, they are of no use to me, they are to be yours. Levi then headed to the bar nearby to the Long Branch, to where he knew Frank Loving would be. He needed to build up that fire in his belly, something we may call liquid courage. He got his drink, went to the fire at the front of the saloon, and took a sip. Around 8:30, 9 o'clock, he decided it was time and walked out of the saloon, just as Frank was walking into the Long Branch, and Levi followed. Frank sat down at a table to start his long night of gambling, and Levi immediately sat down at the same table, and the two started quarreling. Suddenly, Frank stood up and told Levi, "If you have anything to say about me, why don't you say it to my face like a gentleman, and not to my back, you damn son of a bitch." Richardson immediately stood up. "You wouldn't fight anything, you damn..." It's unclear what he said, but it's blocked out for a reason. Frank responded in a cold tone, "You try me and see." Levi drew his pistol and Frank did the same. The result left a scene all too familiar in the West. A saloon full of smoke. One man dead, one man wounded, and the rest of the crowd diving for cover. But in this situation, they were surprisingly unharmed. Frank Levin was surprisingly just slightly wounded with a scratch on his hand, but Levi Richardson was dead with a fatal gunshot wound to the chest. He was also shot through the right arm and the side. The gunfight began by the fire in the front room of the Long Branch. A man named Edward Davies stated, quote, "I saw Levi Richardson with his pistol in his hand. He was chasing Loving around the stove, and according to Kansas history, Mr. Davies was headed to the club room for cover, but he saw Levi reach around the stove and fire at Loving." Charlie Bassett, the marshal of Dodge City, was a few doors down from the Long Branch at Beatty and Kelly's saloon when the gunfire erupted. Without hesitation, he ran towards the source of the gunfire. Bassett would later testify that he, quote, "saw Frank Loving, Levi Richardson, and Duffy, who was the deputy sheriff of Ford County. Richardson was dodging and running around the billiard table. Loving was also running and dodging around the table. Both were shooting at one another." Bassett also testified that Loving's Remington 44 was empty, and Richardson had 5 empty shells. Deputy Sheriff Duffy had disarmed Richardson, and Bassett had disarmed Loving, as both lay on the ground. Richardson then stands up and starts toward Loving, but fell by the table with a fatal gunshot wound to the chest. Frank was taken to jail, but it's shocking that no one else in the room was injured, and even more shocking that Frank Loving wasn't hit. It's said that Richardson's coat was on fire from being so close to Loving's 44 at discharge. If this happened today, the bar would be shut down, and it would be heavily investigated and make huge news. But in Dodge City in the late 70s, it was just an average Tuesday. On the 7th of April, 1879, a coroner's inquest was held, and they ruled that the killing of Levi Richardson was done in self-defense, and Frank Loving was released. The day before, however, 28-year-old Levi Richardson was buried on Sunday, the 6th of April, 1879. Just another man to die with his boots on in Dodge City. According to Kansas history, his brother, James Richardson, came to Dodge City 2 weeks after his death to look after his brother's estate, and his father would arrive a little while later. Quote, "One more family to mourn a relative killed on the frontier." After Dodge City, Frank Loving moved on to another lawless frontier town, Las Vegas, New Mexico, where he stayed for a little while, playing cards with characters such as Dave Rudaball, Mysterious Dave Mather, and Hoodoo Brown. He would then drift on to Trinidad, Colorado in late 1879. At this time, Frank Loving was becoming somewhat of a celebrity after the shootout at the Long Branch Saloon. He was dealing and gambling at the Bank Exchange Saloon in Trinidad, and he would often laugh with other gamblers that his slow draw is what allowed him to come out as the winner in the shootout. The meaning behind this may have been that a slow draw in gambling terms means you slowly bleed the table by making them think you don't have a great hand. Therefore, the other players keep betting, and the pot grows. Then at the end, you show that you indeed have great cards and win the pot. The trouble had followed Frank to Trinidad when he began quarreling with a man named John Allen over loans that the two had made to one another. John, or Jack Allen, sources differ, was an old acquaintance from Dodge City and a one-time deputy in Dodge City. Born in 1842, he made his way to Dodge City and became a deputy, but not a great one. According to Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, on John Allen, that, quote, while Marshal of Dodge, was run up an alley and out of town by a bunch of festive cowboys. Allen then followed his true profession, that of a gambler, and that is how he made his way to Trinidad, Colorado. The Trinidad News described him as, quote, a tall man with black eyes, hair, and a mustache, dresses in black, and so far as the writer knows, is courteous and affable. He is considered skillful in his profession, and has gained the dislike of a number of the gamblers. I take him being disliked by his fellow gamblers as a compliment of the time, meaning he was good at what he did. But just because he wasn't a great marshal, does not mean he wasn't a dangerous man. Allen was also dealing faro at the time, but at the Imperial Clubroom. According to Kansas history, the two had been arguing over loans to one another. Loving stated that Allen had come to town broke, and that he had loaned Allen $20, asking for no collateral, a way of getting his old friend off the ground in the new town. Allen had repaid the debt in full, and on the 14th of April, 1882, Frank Loving was having a streak of bad luck at the table, and asked Allen for a loan of $25. Allen would do so on one condition, that Loving give some sort of collateral as the money he was playing with was not his own. Well, that didn't sit well with Frank, for he felt it was an attack of his character and reputation. But it did not stop him from giving Allen his faro box as collateral. But Frank was still upset about the whole transaction. He had given Allen $20 with no collateral, just as a friend helping a friend, but Allen could not return the favor? On the 15th of April, 1882, the argument had come to a head on Main Street. Words became so heated that both men drew revolvers, but mutual friends intervened and stopped the shooting from taking place. Both men went their separate ways, but the feud was only getting started. The very next evening, around 6:30 p.m., Frank and a few friends walked into the Imperial Saloon. Allen saw Frank and his friends and likely figured that they were coming for him. He acted instantly and pulled his revolver and fired at Frank. Frank cleared leather as well, but as the crowd tried to run for cover, his Colt 45 was not clear of his hand as Frank desperately grabbed another patron and used him as a shield as Allen fired his second shot. As Frank was in the process of reaching for his gun, Allen fired again. Allen then sprinted to the rear door, which opened to a back room, firing one more shot as he entered. Frank followed close behind and emptied his Colt 45 into the dark room thinking Allen was there. But Allen had gone into the back alley and had successfully broke into Hammond's hardware store and was in hiding. At this point, not a single shot had connected with their target. Jim Masterson, younger brother of Bat Masterson and former Dodge City Marshal, was a Trinidad deputy at the time. He had heard the commotion and came running and caught up with Frank at the back door. He took Frank to the front of the Imperial Saloon, disarmed him, and informed him that he was under arrest. He then went looking for Allen at Hammond's store, but being unable to locate him, he returned and found Frank in possession of two other guns looking for Allen near the Catholic Covenant that was down the street, and again, Masterson disarmed him. Masterson then went looking for Allen at Martin's Saloon, but could not find him there either. As he was returning to the Imperial Saloon, another shot was fired. Masterson came running to the hardware store and met Frank coming out. Frank saw Masterson and said, "Jim, I'm shot." Frank being out of ammunition and without a firearm, he figured he'd find one at the hardware store. What he did not know was Allen had been in hiding there. As Frank was in the process of reloading his gun, Allen shot a .45 caliber slug through his back that lodged in his left arm and shattered it. Masterson helped Frank back to the Imperial, and the doctor was called. According to Frank himself, Allen had entered the basement of the hardware store, came up the stairway, through a door 6 feet from where Loving was reloading, and fired the fatal shot. Allen was eventually located and arrested by Masterson and Lou Krieger. 20 guards had to be put on duty to protect Allen from vigilante justice, and as you may know, if you listen to our Daniel Boone May episode, vigilante justice can be brutal. Frank Loving was treated by the doctor and asked to be taken to his home. He held on for 5 more days before passing on the 21st of April, 1882, from the effects of a gunshot wound. Murder charges were now filed against Allen. After a preliminary hearing, Allen was held without bail until the next term of the district court. And in September of 1882, he would be found not guilty and walked away as a free man. He immediately left town, went back to Dodge City, and became a street preacher. Bat Masterson wrote, quote, "And of course, all was forgiven." Frank Cockeyed Loving's funeral was held at his home. It was attended by many, as he, quote, "strived to be a good friend and was endured to many." Frank Loving left behind his wife Maddie, a 2-year-old son named John, and a 1-year-old daughter named Minty. I hope you all enjoyed this little short episode on Cockeyed Frank Loving. But before we go, was he really cockeyed? Well, according to Kansas history, he was called cockeyed because, quote, "one of his optics bearing in a northeast direction to the other." Loving was one of the many gamblers and gunfighters of the West to die with their boots on. He is a testament to the times and the way of life that fascinates many of us today. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you do, please leave a rating. It is an awesome way for this podcast to grow, and I appreciate it greatly. Please email me with comments, questions, concerns, and I will try my best to get back to you. You can email me at wildwestdeepdives@gmail.com. We will see you all next time. When in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.